Hello, welcome to the Life Capoeira, and very pleased to welcome our guest today, Graduada Esquiva, who is in Salvador, Bahia. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I've enjoyed the last couple of episodes of your podcast, so yeah, I'm pleased to be part of it as well.
Brilliant. So let's jump in then. How did you get started on your capoeira journey? Where did it begin?
Actually, a really long time ago, back in Australia, back in the day when I was living in Australia, I worked on a Blockbuster video. I was old enough to remember that. And one of my customers was this Brazilian guy, and he would always come in and say, "Oh yeah, I give these classes, you should come along. You should give these classes, you should come along." And I always said, yeah, I will. 3 years later, right before I was ready to move to the UK, I had some extra time on my hands, like one of my jobs. And I finally went along, and it was a capoeira class. And of course I loved it. And it was group Zambia Congo, which is the group of Mestre Jenny, who's the student of Mestre Bimba, and his son, Mestre Luis Baravento. He was the leader of that group in Australia. But I trained Caracol, he's contra Mestre Caracol, but in November he has his formatura for ser Mestre. So shortly, Mestre Caracol, and now they're called Shango because they changed their name. Yeah, so I started with them back in the day, back in Australia. But yeah, then I moved to the UK like 3 months after starting and finding this amazing thing. I moved to the UK to study at Oxford, and yeah, completely forgot about capoeira while I was trying to figure out how to live in a new country, study at a fairly serious university that I wasn't maybe prepared for, and working and everything. But then a few years after that, I met a friend in Oxford, and he said, "Oh yeah, I train capoeira with a friend of mine who teachers." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I do capoeira too," back in the day for a couple of months. And so I went along with him, and a bolisnel that is in Oxford. The master of the group is Luis Negão Narciso, and the professor who was giving the class at the time was Professor Dourado, and he is English, but one of the best capoeira professors that I've ever had. He just explains everything so well. So it was a really amazing group to be part of because, on the one hand, you had this movement teacher who was really amazing at explaining the movements and showing you how to do that with your body. And on the other side, you had this mestre from Salvador, Bahia, from the lineage of Mestre Bimba, like a direct lineage from Mestre Bimba as well, and had that real knowledge about capoeira, the culture of capoeira. So I had both of those amazing things going on. So again, I fell in love with capoeira again and trained there for 7 years before I moved to Brazil. It's quite a lot to say.
How did you get your apelido along the way of Esquiva?
Oh, well, yes. So the first time I played in the Roda with my then mestre, because I've since changed groups, but the first time I played in the Roda with Mestre Negão, it was like my second class. And so he would like lift his leg up to do a Melo de Frente, and I would just kind of like stare at him, and he'd be like, Esquiva. And I was like, "Oh yeah, of course." And then the next kick could be an Armada, and I'd still be standing there, and he'd be like, "You need to Esquiva." And I'd be like, "Oh yeah, of course." And so at the end of the Roda, he just looked at me and he said, "Your name is Esquiva." I was like, "Okay." So I love this story.
So you've had capoeira in Australia, the UK, Bahia. How do they all compare with each other? I mean, obviously you had the Bimba's lineage in both Australia and the UK. And obviously only a few months in Australia, but were there any big major differences that you noticed?
Well, so in the UK, Group of Bolas now, it's a traditional regional group that does capoeira regional do Mestre Bimba. Perfect. So from there, my mestre, he organized a lot of times for us to visit Brazil. So I visited Brazil with my mestre a number of times, I think 3 times. And so when I was here, I met someone who was also a capoeirista. And so things happened. After a while, about 5 years ago, I decided to move here to be with him. And when I first moved here, I stayed as part of Abolição. But then I was obviously training with my partner's group. I was teaching in my partner's group. I was doing everything with my partner's group. So and there's no one else from Abolição here in Brazil. It's just in England. So after some time, it just made sense to change groups since all the work that I do is with this group. So I spoke to Mestre Negão, and he was like, "Yeah, I understand, don't worry." So I changed group. And so here, my group is not a traditional regional group. Our group is called Nayuko Capoeira, but we are part of the family Quilombolas Capoeira of Mestre Dede, which is one of the oldest capoeira groups in Salvador. We celebrated 50 years this year. And so we call ourselves a capoeiragem group. So we're not regional, we're not Angola. We like to say we play whatever the berimbau plays, but then we're not contemporaneous group like Abadá or Corujoro either. It's like, it's traditional capoeira from Salvador. It's hard to put a name on, like whether it's regional, Angola, contemporaneous. It's like really hard to put your finger on. It's just the capoeira that we play in Bahia. And so it is quite different. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, quite different technically, like, you know, and obviously in capoeira regional, you have one berimbau, dos panderos, bimba, that kind of thing. And in Angola, you have your full bateria, capoeira, Grande Band de Angola, this kind of thing. So the battery is different and the kind of gameplay is different. So that was one thing, because I come from a really traditional regional background, to open my mind to more types of capoeira. Although I had in Oxford, so Oxford obviously small place, but we're very lucky. So we had the regional group, but also Mestre Marcelo Angola, he has an Angola group there as well, Angoleiros do Mar. So we train with them sometimes as well. So a little bit of Angola, but still, you know, just a little. So yeah, here in Salvador, you have to be able to play everything, because yeah, you can turn up to a roda, it'll start as an Angola roda, and then it'll turn into a kind of Sobrento Grande de Angola roda, and then they'll start at the end playing Sobrento Grande de Bimba, and you have to be able to play all three if you want to play in the roda. So that was fun. What else? So the other thing that people, obviously, before you come to Brazil, people say to you, you know, be careful. Like here in Europe, you know, the rodas are friendly. You know, you don't really expect anyone to try and beat you up or anything like that. And in Brazil, you know, it's more of a fight. So you have to be prepared for that. So I was prepared for that. And that I found that that's true, and that's also not true. So like if you visit like an academy, you know, they are safe places, because capoeira has become really professional here in Salvador. A lot of, you know, people do it for their work. They teach capoeira at school. They have academies full of children and young people. So they have a vested interest in making sure their academies are really safe. So there's that side of it. But then there are street rodas where it is kind of an anything goes kind of environment. In some ways, I think I'm lucky being female, because, you know, I'm not like, you know, those big male capoeiristas with all the muscles. They're not going to want to pick on me too much, you know, because that would look bad for them. Because but yeah, the female capoeiristas here, they like to get into it as well. And yeah, the kicks are real. You know, you have to learn to esquiva. Thank goodness I have now, finally. So yeah, so it can be quite intense. But that's part of the fun, a little bit of the danger. But yeah, I find it's you know, before I came to Brazil, the stories that I was told about what it would be like, and you know, the violence and what it would be like, yeah, it wasn't quite like that. It was it's a much more communal environment where, you know, these days we're all capoeiristas. There's a lot less infighting and people unexpectedly wanting to make their name on top of you and like beat you up. And I haven't really experienced very much of that, thank goodness.
It sounds like of the capoeira in Bahia, but potentially overplayed a bit when talked about outside of Brazil.
Yeah. But then again, like if you go to Sao Paulo, like the Roda de República, or if you go to Brasilia, I mean, there are still street rodas that are intense, really intense. But I think Bahia, it's maybe calmed down a bit, because like I said, a lot more people they're a professional capoeirista, and they teach children and they do public shows and things like that. And, you know, fist fights in the street that, you know, everyone can see, it just gives capoeira a bad name. So people here are more conscious of, you know, maintaining the good name of capoeira in the community.
And how's it been navigating the capoeira world in Bahia as a foreigner sort of coming in? Has that made much of a difference, or have you not really noticed it?
Oh no, I definitely, you definitely notice it. People meet you, they just assume you can't speak Portuguese, and you have to go, no, I speak Portuguese, it's fine. I mean, not now, obviously, it's been a while, but when I first arrived, it was not like that. I find, so it's great. The capoeira community in Bahia is enormous, because there are so many capoeiristas here, but it's also really small. Like, it feels like everyone knows each other, because everyone's been playing capoeira since they were children. They've all been going to the same events for like 20, 30 years. So everyone knows each other. So when you turn up to a roda, 80% of the people there know each other. And so if you're part of that 80%, that's really nice. If you're not part of that 80%, you're a bit like, okay. And then that also comes into the play in the roda as well. Like, oh, like if you're watching a roda, you're like, oh, I want to play with my friend. I haven't played with that guy for 3 years. You know, someone will buy to play with them. If they don't know you, they might be less inclined to want to buy and play with you, or they might buy in front of you and things like that because they don't know you. So that's the thing that you see a lot. But I guess I was lucky because, the first time they came here to Bahia, I was with my maestri, and he also knows a lot of people here. So to turn up with someone who knows people who can introduce you is obviously really great. But now my husband is a capoeirista. He's been playing capoeira here in Salvador for 30 years. Professor Picolé da Bahia, I don't think I've dropped his name yet. I should drop that. So obviously, I have him to introduce me to people and things like that. And so now I know the capoeira community here pretty well. So now it feels fine. But yeah, maybe the first year, it was quite daunting, often to show up a roda and feel like everyone knows each other and I have no idea what's going on.
And have you found teaching capoeira as a foreigner in Bahia? Is that readily accepted, or have you found any pushback from that?
Well, let's say. So I haven't actually found much pushback. So I did when I arrived in Brazil, I was still with my old group, and I was a graduada, so with my old group, and I was assisting my new group, Naiko Capoeira, with their teaching, especially with their kids. There were some opportunities to take on some individual teaching. There was a few projects that were like, oh, would you like to come along and teach capoeira in this project? And I thought about it, but it was really difficult because it's like I'm here on my own. There's no one else from my group here in Salvador. And so the people I would be relying on to help me, who would cover for me if I'm sick, who would come along and help play instruments with me if we wanted to do a roda, that type of thing, would all be from this other group that I wasn't yet part of. And it's really difficult. I can't ask these people to sacrifice their time to do work for the name of someone else's group kind of thing. So that was when I decided to change my group and into my new group. And that opened up a lot of doors just because, I had that confidence that I could take on projects and start classes, and then I would have people to support me and I wouldn't be on my own and asking ridiculous favors from people. And then last year I did my formatura, and that's a big moment, particularly here in Salvador. It's when you show up to a lot of rodas, like Bachillerato rodas and things like that, basically you only get to play on the roda once you have done your formatura, with the kids and with the people who are getting there earlier births. And so, those things fell into place and I was able to expand my teaching. So now I teach more classes as part of our academy, and I've started my own classes as well. I will say that my classes are mostly full of women. I don't believe that is a not being Brazilian thing. I think that is being a female thing. And, people turn up to a class and, you aspire to be like a person, or you aspire to do the things that the person who was teaching the class is doing. And maybe unsurprisingly, the people who turn up and get that feeling with my classes are other women, and that makes sense, and no complaints whatsoever about that. But I don't find to get pushback, and the people who do participate in the classes and say that they enjoy the classes say that they quite like that I do have a different teaching style, because a lot of people here, they start capoeira as a kid and you learn a lot of it through osmosis. Obviously you turn up to the classes, you turn up the roda, you see things and you just figure out what's going on. And, and that's a great way to learn. But because, I started older and just come from a different kind of world of learning, it's much more breaking things down, explaining things in more detail. And some students really appreciate that. So I say that's maybe one of the things that sets my classes apart. So the people that like that kind of class really enjoy this.
Have you got any goals that you're working towards with your own capoeira or your classes? Or are you just seeing where the path leads you?
Well, definitely trying to, so obviously the pandemic, everyone is going to say the same thing. The pandemic was a hard time for capoeira. We lost a lot of students during the pandemic, just especially students that are around that age, between maybe 18 and 25. They start working, they start getting married, they start having kids and stuff like that, and they just kind of drift away from capoeira. And then with the pandemic, a lot of them stopped and just haven't come back. So a big goal that, we have for the group is to, recruit a lot more students and build the group back up to the level that it was before the pandemic. I'm sure I'm not the only person who would have that goal. So that's a big one. For me personally, like I said, I only did my formatura last year, so I don't really have any graduation related goals on the horizon. But my big dream now is my Sofa Mortal. I've been working on quite a few Flores, but I haven't got my Salto Mortal yet. And I'm determined I'm going to get it this year. I've already lined up all the people who are going to, help me get that this year. Because one thing that we lack here is in England, often when we train Flores, we go to the gymnastic studios with the bouncy floors and the foam pits and stuff like that. We don't have those here. We go to the beach, you find a little hill of sand, and you hope for the best. But yeah, I'm determined to get that this year. And why I bother to mention it is because one thing that people say to me a lot, especially new students, is I will never be able to, and that really kind of gets on my nerves. Because I always remind people, I started capoeira when I was 28. And, and people say, unless you're a kid, you'll never get like a macaco or palhaço, and you'll never be able to do all the movements with the spine and stuff like that. And it's like, well, I started when I was 28, and these are movements that I do. And maybe obviously not like, there's kids that don't have spines, not like they do it, but these are all things that you can learn. So that's why for me, it's an important goal, not just because I want to be able to do it because it's super cool, but it's part of that process of when people say, but I can't, it's like, you can. It's about the process. So fingers crossed. Let's see. Ask me in 6 months.
Good luck. What is capoeira?
Wow. Well, for me, I want to maybe say that capoeira is life. Because as Maestro Pastinha, he has that music, like everything good in my life, it's capoeira that gave it to me. And we say that, but for me, where I am currently in my life, I feel like that is really true. I'm living in Brazil. I've met my current partner. The work that I do right now, it's all, even if it's not actually capoeira, a lot of the connections I've made and things like that, they've all been because of capoeira. So for me, it's not like a sport that you do, or even, we say it's not a sport, it's much more than a sport, but it's not like a hobby or a recreational activity. It's like a core part of my life and the culture that I'm now part of, and everything that I do. And I think for a lot of capoeiristas, especially here, that's very true, that it's not just something that they do. It's a part of who they are. The longer I live here, the more I feel that that's true for me too.
Thank you very much for coming on capoeira. Are there any other closing thoughts or comments you'd like to say?
Let me think. Well, I feel bad because I told the story of my capoeira journey right up to before I moved to Brazil, and I don't feel like I gave sufficient plugging to my current group. Like I said, we're called Nayako Capoeira. We're a really small group. We only have the one nucleo here in Salvador, but we're part of the larger capoeira group called Quilombolas Capoeira, which is, like I said, one of the oldest capoeira groups in Salvador. 50 years, 2023, 50 years of capoeira Quilombolas. And really proud to be part of this group. And for me, like I said, I did my formatura last year, and to do it here in Brazil and to have mestres who I've idolized from a distance for years turn up to the event, play with me for my formatura, recognize me with their title and invite me to play in the Hotters and things like that has been something that you could only imagine. I remember back in Oxford, back in the day when I got my second or third belt, I can't remember. And the guy who was teaching our classes, who I mentioned, Dorado, he got his professor belt. You were like, wow, that's amazing. That is something that you don't even imagine for yourself. And, so like I say, to be on that road and to have that is kind of crazy, incredible, and something that I wouldn't have imagined even 5 years ago. So that's kind of something. Yeah, I kind of forget where I was going with that, but, there you go.
The link to your group in the episode description if I want to check that out. If anybody wants to get in touch, you can find us at thelifecapoeira@gmail.com, and we're on Facebook and Instagram with the same name. So thank you very much, Esquiva, for coming on. It's been a pleasure, and good luck with your Mortal. And I'm 6 months, I believe. We'll find out how you've got on.
Thank you for having me. It's been an interesting experience. And I'll be looking out for future episodes of the podcast to hear from other people as well.
Ciao.
Ciao.